Okay, Erev Tov, everybody. Bruchim Habayim. Thank you for coming out again. This very, very chilly, bone-chilling Monday night for our second of our series of Shovavim, Shiurim, here at the Sfar Kila Center. Last week we had the great honor to have Rabbi Moshe Rosenbaum speak with us. Tonight we have the kavod to have my dear friend Rabbi Shemuel Pinto, who was the spearhead of giving these classes here. You know, he did it last year with a tremendous success, a beautiful audience we had, and he's here again. And he will give tonight's shiur. Tonight's to men, and B'ezrat Hashem we will follow it up again in a couple of weeks to ladies. And for the men that are in this room, the next couple of weeks are for ladies. But I do encourage your better half, if you have a better half, or if you have any other ladies that are in the realm of the kala sphere, or newlyweds, or even if it's not newlyweds, even if there are ladies looking to replenish or rejuvenate their de'ot and knowledge in taharat mishpacha, or family purity, or ideas in marriage, please encourage them to come. Next week we'll have Rav Rosenbaum back next week B'ezrat Hashem, and then we will have Rav Pinto again in a couple of weeks. So please encourage them to come. And without further ado, I want to invite Rav Pinto to give the shiur. Chazak.
Thank you very much, everyone, Rabbi David, for making this beautiful Bet HaMidrash vibrant and bringing life to it. Torah is so special, so unique in so many different ways, and coming out of the cold, in fact, is what we need. The warmth of Torah to keep us, on high. Actually, just a few minutes ago, I got a young fellow who asked his wife, "Should I attend the class tonight?" And he says to her, "Well, it's about buying your wife expensive jewelry." To which he says, "Go." Now, this man happens to be here right now. It's not clear if she meant to say go to the shiur or go to get me jewelry. But either way, both. So, thank you everybody for being here. We're just gonna talk a little bit about a review class about the topic of marriage, the topic of the beautiful mitzvah of taharat hamishpacha, family purity, and the most important is to understand how the two are linked to each other, how the observance of the mitzvot of taharat hamishpacha can lead to bring harmony into one's own home, into one's marriage, into one's family. How is that connected? As we know, it's very important to have review classes because there's always updates in various fields. In the halachic field, there's always updates in the medical field as well. And especially when it comes to the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, it is important to have a review class, which, as we understand, the topic of these halachot is not something which is mostly shared in a family setting, around the Shabbat table, for example, where everybody discusses the laws of Nida. This is obviously lived in privacy and in one's own intimacy, and therefore it's important to make sure that we kind of keep up with those halachot, we don't forget, or sometimes get misconception about the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, as opposed to other mitzvot. So imagine you come to Bet HaKnesset and your tefillin is not positioned properly. You would have probably more than one person coming over to you, most likely, to redirect you. Whereas in the field of Taharat HaMishpacha, which is lived in one's own intimacy, that's not the case. And therefore, it is important to bring up this subject in the setting of Torah of a shiur and make sure to get everything right and review it, refresh our memory about this beautiful halachot. As we know, there's always some kind of, I would say, discomfort a person may feel like when bringing up some part of the halachot, but we have to know not to use false modesty, because we have to go past this kind of natural discomfort about talking about those things, because that's the only way to make sure that we do halakha properly, not to be lenient where we shouldn't be too lenient, and not to be too stringent when it's not asked for, but rather to remind ourselves that when we bring a she'elah, a question, to a rabbi, a qualified rav in this field, to him it's just a technical procedure, and it is something not to shy away from. The same way if a person had a medical condition, she would probably approach a doctor to get the proper therapy. The same way we should, not shy away. This is Torah Hashem, and this is to bring, bracha into our midst. The obvious question is, why men? Why does it relate to men? You would expect women to come to a shiur like this one. What do men have to do with anything? So that once again we have to go back to the sources of the Chachamim, and we have this famous Gemara or Rashba as well, where we have the concept of le'olam yelamed adam betoch beto, meaning that the involvement of a husband is very important in the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, because it's, the experience of Nida is something which must be lived in a couple together, husband and wife, not individually, and that for various reasons. First of all, both husband and wife are equally concerned about the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha, because the status of the wife affects not only herself, but also the husband in his relationship with her. So because husband and wife are both equally concerned, they should both get involved with it. Also, as far as participation is concerned, it's very important that the husband shows interest in this field of Taharat HaMishpacha, which, for example, if there are she'elot, halachic question to bring up, he should be involved. He should show interest into it and be part of the process. For example, when a woman prepares herself to go to the mikveh, there's a whole procedure of preparation that she has to undergo. It's important that the husband be there at home to take care of the children, either maybe to allow the wife to be relaxed, not just when she prepares for the mikveh, but when she actually goes to the tevilah. It's a very important thing for a woman to be relaxed at that moment. And again, if the husband is involved in this whole process of Taharat HaMishpacha, that is lived together jointly between husband and wife. They both get support from each other, and this is the way to go. So the subject for tonight: what is the link between family purity, Taharat HaMishpacha, and harmony in marriage? So in Mitzvah Hashem, we're going to try to get into this subject. What is the obvious question? A link? Naturally, you would think, if anything, Taharat HaMishpacha breaks the flow, the romance, perhaps the good time in marriage, if anything, because they got to stop for about how many days? Roughly 12 days per month. There's no physical interaction between husband and wife. I mean, if someone hears that for the first time, you would think that's not normal. This is like the best way to break a marriage, to break the harmony in a home. How do you explain that the Torah wants us to do such a thing? And the more so, how does the fulfillment of Taharat HaMishpacha lead to bring actually more harmony into one's home rather than less harmony? So if you look at statistics, there's no question that people who observe carefully enough the laws of Taharat HaMishpacha usually are the ones whose marriage is more lasting, longer, is more of a higher standard of relationship than those who just do whatever they want, whenever they want, whichever way they want. And the question is, obviously, how does one explain the other? You would think just the other way around. So let's take a little step back about Taharat HaMishpacha. Let's go now deal a little bit more about marriage in general. Marriage, as they say, welcome to the club. For those, I know there's a few here who are not yet married, at least, right? So I don't want to discourage anybody.
When I was getting married,
How many years you married? How many years, Baruch Hashem? 50?
1981.
Okay, so that's 42 years. That's a record, I think, in the room.
The
There.
same
Want to
one.
be Moshe, more than 42? More than 42.
So,
What? You're older than me.
anybody more than me?
Yeah, be Moshe Cohen. He's more.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Baruch Hashem, yes.
So when I told Rabbi Sefer, Rabbi, I'm engaged. So he said, I want you to know, okay, marriage life is miserable, but you're in good company.
Okay, so basically, let's talk a little bit about the unbalance, the lack of balance in any natural marriage, or rather difficulties that may come along with a normal marriage. Okay? For example, we know that husband and wife have the mission to please one another, to make one another happy. One of the big mistakes that the youth does is to believe that the needs of the husband and wife are similar. This is the biggest mistake you could possibly make in marriage, about marriage. We know from experience, or from common sense, that men and women are very, very different from each other in their needs, in what they expect. For example, men are more on the physical side than women. Women are obviously more emotional. Whether we like it or not, we know it's a fact. And the need of each of the two spouses is to satisfy to make sure that the goal in marriage, to make sure that the needs of your spouse are satisfied. In the case of a man, to make sure that the emotional needs of your wife get satisfied. So how do we do that? When there's a relation between a man and a woman, the man needs more physical contact, while the woman is more interested into the emotional bond. So that creates a little bit of a gap, because each one has different needs. And as we know, in order to satisfy one another, you have to think of satisfying the need of the other, not of your own needs. So that means that man has to focus more on the emotional needs of his spouse, and the woman more on the physical need of her husband. But once again, how do we do that? How do we accomplish that? That's one aspect of marriage that brings obviously difficulty, natural, right, hardship in any marriage. Another aspect that could bring some challenges in marriages is the fact that if you think of the aspect of marriage where there is some kind of enjoyment, of pleasure, well, in life, anything that you overuse you become like a little tired of it. There's a certain lassitude or resentment even of, the same being together with the same person. Like anything around in the world where you try to get physical pleasure from, whether it's Swiss chocolate or a nice car, a lavish home, you know that with time we get tired of it. We don't feel like it's anything special anymore, and we usually move on to the next level. We always aim and yearn for something better and better, as if we're never satisfied with what we have. So the same pattern, the same aspect could apply to marriage as well. You may have married the most attractive woman, but with time, you would see that eventually becomes like mundane. There's nothing new to it, nothing enjoyable. And how do you get over this problem? So to answer those two questions, we have to realize that Taharat HaMishpacha is actually here to answer those two problems. Number one, it goes without saying that by having some physical distance between a husband and wife for almost half the time, that obviously gives a chance to men, especially men who has that physical impulse and urge to control himself. We call this in English discipline oneself. Right? Natural impulse the man has for a woman is the biggest human drive a person could have. And yet here, in his own home, with his own wife, he has to learn how to control himself, how to discipline himself. This obviously will create a certain level of balance in their relationship where a person will focus more on the emotional needs of his wife when he's not able to have any physical contact during the time of nida, of separation, of physical separation between man and his wife. For those who do not have the privilege to keep Taharat HaMishpacha, many times, if a man is not able to control his urges, it could give the wife a feeling that she's like an object of desire for the husband to just satisfy his own personal desire. And that kind of takes away the dignity that a woman can have about herself, feeling that she's just there to satisfy the needs of the husband, which to her seem to be out of proportion. Because again, to a woman, the physical urges that a man has are almost not understandable. When nida comes and a man learns how to control his, physical urges, natural urges towards his wife, he kind of give his wife some space, but at the same time, he gives her the chance to feel that she's a person. She's a person that the man has, could feel about his wife, not being just a body, but also a neshama, a soul, a person, someone with personality, with character trait, with feelings especially. And this is the time more than ever when a man could fully concentrate on the emotional side of his wife to kind of satisfy that side of her being, of her existence, and reinforce the communication. We're going to see very briefly that during the time of nida, there's obviously some physical distance that men and women have to take from each other. But that's just in a physical aspect. In any other way, the communication, the emotional bond between a husband and wife should continue, if not being reinforced during the time of nida more than ever. Because that's the time when a man doesn't have the physical aspect of his relationship with his wife to concentrate on, and he has more room to focus more on the emotional bond, with take care of the need of his wife, such as giving her attention. Give a woman attention is not a luxury for a woman. As a man, I could say that it takes a certain type of practice to learn to understand that a woman needs attention. To a man, it may be an extra thing to get. It's not so much so a need, but for a woman, it is something that's mandatory to have. So a man has to learn how to give his wife attention in so many different ways, whichever way possible he could, whether it means buying her jewelry for those who could afford it, or even just in a cheaper way, just give compliments. Compliments sometimes are worth more than actual jewelry, if you mean what you're saying, obviously. Right? Some women are desperate for a little thank you from a husband. Right? Some of the men don't know how to do that. They don't know how to compliment. What is it? Appreciation.
If she does something in the future, you have to give her credit.
Compliment, credit.
It's beautiful, it's tasty, it's good. But give her also.
Baruch Hashem. That's what keeps the marriage going, right?
Even if the food is not good, you have to say it's good.
Yeah, but if you do that, then you might make it again.
That's what I heard.
More so. Very good.
Or just keep quiet.
Okay, very good. So to answer the first question, how do you take care of the lack of balance in a relationship between man and woman who are so different from each other? The man is more physical, the woman is more emotional. The Torah says, you know what the solution is? Take a break from any physical contact for a little while to give yourself a chance to control yourself, to discipline yourself, and to allow your wife to understand that you're not just there for, using her as an object of desire, but rather you're there to satisfy her, making her happy, sharing all kind of emotional, discussions together, some kind of, you look at her like she's a person with emotions, with feelings. So you have time to reinforce that communication. And that's the time of Taharat HaMishpacha, which is mostly needed.
I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding that.
Yes. Sure.
If there's a section in the Gemara that says "Marbeh sichai ma'isha, marbeh tza'ar."
Right. So that's a good question. Marbeh sichai ma'isha. So that obviously, the Rabbi explains when it says marbeh, you have to be very precise about the term. Marbeh means to increase, meaning to excessively talking with a woman is not good. But with your own wife, right, that you need to provide her with emotional bond, especially during the time of Nida, when they feel a little bit somewhat rejected because of the physical distance between the man and a woman, more than ever, you have to continue nurturing the communication, the emotional bond, right? And it's very important to understand that the time of Nida is not a time when we stop communicating. To the contrary, we have to reinforce the communication. Anything which is, right, the only area that you have to keep away from is physical distance or the type of talks which could be leading to relationship with your wife. Other than that, anything else, you have to reinforce the communication more than ever, like we said before, because it's psychological. When you know that as a man, you can have access to your wife physically, a man doesn't have the patience. Many times, that's one of the problems that we find in marriages, when a man doesn't give enough time to his wife to be emotionally happy and excited and just enjoying the relationship. Right. But during the time of Nida, you have nothing else, no other way to kind of, show your wife that you care for her, that you love her, other than by being emotionally, gentle and caring for her.
I think in this
Yes.
class I can ask this question.
Sure.
In Pirkei Avot, I think, you know where I'm going with this? I think
Yeah.
פרק ד' בן זומא אומר,
Mhm.
מי הגיבור הכובש את יצרו. So whenever I read this is the first time I'm saying it, I think about this time for
The time of Taharat HaMishpacha, when you have to learn how to be kovesh et yitzro, to be strong and
Because I don't think there's any
absolutely.
כובש יותר גדול.
Mhm. Very good, very good. That applies very nicely during the time, especially when nobody is around. You're alone with your wife at home, right? And the Gemara says about it, suga bashoshanim, that a married couple, when the wife is not tehora, is compared to a like thorns, like a fence of thorns, where with a little, just guidelines around, that you could handle it, that you're not going to break the rules, you're going to keep distant physically from your wife. That's the power of Am Yisrael, suga bashoshanim. Very good. So, like we said, Taharat HaMishpacha is great in that sense that it creates within a person the ability to learn how to discipline himself. How great it is to have discipline. Well, ask any parent, any teacher, right? That's the dream of anyone who cares for other people, to have them disciplined. Now, if you discipline yourself in one area, usually it helps you discipline yourself in other areas. For example, a person who is a heavy smoker, but he knows that when Shabbat comes, no matter what, he's not going to touch it. And if it's 2 days Shabbat Yom Tov or 3 days, it doesn't matter. He'll control himself. Or, right, with addiction of iPhones, same way. Shabbat comes, you don't touch it. It doesn't matter how hard it is. Shabbat is Shabbat. So what is that teaching you? You could discipline yourself in one area. That's going to make it easier to discipline yourself, how to control yourself, your urges, your pulsions in other areas where it could be difficult. That's the power of, right? Because discipline has an impact on the person himself. So the way you train yourself, you actually make yourself a better person.
Shows that you have the power.
Of control. Very good. Okay, so now let's talk about the second aspect of difficulty one may find in marriage, which is lassitude, meaning that the person could lose sometimes excitement in his own marriage. How do we fight this issue, this problem, this weakness that may be around? So if we talk in the context of marriage, we could obviously mention the concept of pleasure, right? Baruch Hashem, we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for giving us this beautiful asset that when a man meets a woman to get married to, he has this natural good feeling, elevation, enjoyment, which is why we say bracha under the chuppah, asher bara, sason v'simcha, and then we say ahava ve'achva, love, brotherhood. I'm afraid to say brotherhood, it may be misunderstood. Shalom ve're'ut, peace and friendship. We thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for creating this component of ahava that we don't just, like animals, they mate and they don't live together. By ish ve'ishto, it's all different ball game. It's a lifetime journey that we kind of share together our lives, our experiences, our emotions, our finances, everything we have in life we have to share with our spouses. So we thank HaKadosh Baruch Hu for that. So definitely pleasure is an important component in marriage. And if that's the case, let's try to define what is true pleasure. What is pleasure in the Torah? How does the Torah look at pleasure? Take, for example, Oneg Shabbat. Shabbat is a mitzvah to have Oneg Shabbat, to enjoy good food, to rest up on Shabbat, to relax, to bring the kind of the concept of enjoying Shabbat. Could you imagine spending Shabbat without food? How would you feel the Shabbat if you didn't have food? It's much harder to feel Shabbat. When Shabbat keep put together, it's hard. That's why we don't have Besamim, right? Because it's hard to enjoy the Shabbat.
If I wake up in the morning and I don't smell the chulin,
Chulent? Oh, what is this, Rabbi Kadosh? Chulent? You heard it?
I don't smell
Maybe the Rakim have this
the
sort of
whole
chulent?
Shabbat is gone.
Right. So the question is that the purpose of Shabbat, to enjoy food? Could someone explain that to me? Without food, you can't enjoy Shabbat. But at the same time, is that the goal? Is that the main purpose of keeping Shabbat, to have good food, to enjoy the food, to have the Neshama Yetera that allows you to enjoy the food better? Right? Remember the same cholent or dafina or chamin. If you eat it during the week, the same exact chamin, not even close to what it feels like, it tastes like when you do it on Shabbat, right? So what's that? Neshama Yetera. Rashi says, what's Neshama Yetera? The ability to enjoy foods, good food on Shabbat. That's what Neshama Yetera is, according to Rashi. Right? Beautiful. Ingredient of Shabbat Kodesh. Right? So is that the purpose of keeping Shabbat, to enjoy food? Obviously not. But nevertheless, the enjoyment of Shabbat is a means to elevate yourself during Shabbat. Right? It's a means, it's a way to get elevation over Shabbat. The same thing with marriage. Of course, there's a component of pleasure when a man and woman are together, husband and wife. And Baruch Hashem, they wear this extremely important asset. But to make out of it a goal, a purpose, that maybe in the secular world they talk about it this way. In our Torah, we know that it's not a purpose in itself, but it's a very important tool that we need to elevate ourselves. Now, elevate yourself in your marriage. Have you heard that? How do you elevate yourself through marriage? In what sense does a man elevate himself when he meets a young lady and they get married together? What kind of elevation are we talking here about?
Happiness.
Very good. Happiness. Beautiful. Happiness. I'm glad you mentioned that. You know that there's a very important component about happiness. Why is happiness important in marriage? Because it connects. Chachamim tell us, when you get pleasure through anything, you feel connected to that thing. Why is it that Yitzchak Avinu, when he's about to give the brachot to Yaakov or Esav, he says, Havi ali tzayid, bring me some food, and Socket bless you. And all the tzaddikim to this very day, when you go to them, Baba Salah al Shalom just said his Hilula yesterday, first thing he would do, sit down, eat, even before you even open your mouth to talk about what you came for. Just have food, drink, say brachot, enjoy yourself. After you relax, okay, now let's talk. Why? Because pleasure could connect, right? There's a powerful message in the Sefer Igletal. Sefer Igletal on Hilchot Shabbat. He brings down the importance about learning Torah besimcha. Not just learning Torah, but to feel the joy, the excitement when you learn Torah. Why? Because he says the best way for you to connect with Torah Kedosha is when you learn, but not just learning like in a passive way. When you learn with excitement, the simcha that you experience when you learn Torah is what connects you. It bonds you with the Torah. And the same thing Chazal tell us. There's a Rashi in the Gemara Sanhedrin which says that in order to bond Vayu lebasar echad, you know how this happens, that husband and wife feel like basar echad, like one flesh together? Rashi says because of the hana'ah, of the physical pleasure that the husband and wife feel when they are together, they're united together. That is what makes them feel like one, because each one provides that pleasure to the other, and that's what makes them feel bonded together. Vayu lebasar echad. Look at the Rashi over the Sanhedrin, I forget the daf. Yes. That's the way to elevate yourself, to use the pleasure that could be felt between a husband and wife when they have a relationship together. That could be used to elevate yourself, to reinforce the bond between you and your wife, which is obviously the purpose of marriage, to go through life building up our connection, our bond as one. Right? The wedding is only a start point. The marriage itself takes a lifetime to build up, because that's the bond that you try to build up. And I think a lifetime is a little too short, to be honest, to create a bond properly between husband and wife. Life is not long enough for that. There's so much to work on to show how much we care for one another, how much we're there for one another. And like we said, the component of pleasure was given by Kadosh Baruch Hu for us to use, not as a purpose for itself in marriage, but rather as a tool for us to elevate ourselves and to reinforce the bond between husband and wife, the achdut, the feeling to be one. So if that's the purpose of feeling the pleasure in marriage, what is the best way to feel pleasure? If pleasure is such an important tool, how could one enhance his level of pleasure in marriage? Now, the best way to get the wrong answer is to watch movies. Because I tell my students, Rabbi Kadosh, to find out in my school, high school where I teach, the best way to fail in marriage is to turn to the secular world and see what they have to teach you. It's all about spontaneous feelings. As we know, spontaneous feelings come and go, not as fast as they come, but faster than they come. The Torah says, don't worry about the spontaneous. They will come eventually. Work on what's permanent. What's permanent? The bond, the connection, the commitment for one another. Build up the emotional needs for your wife, in your wife. She should work on building the needs of her husband as well. Together, this is a bond that's everlasting. Easy? Obviously not easy. But it's permanent. It's everlasting. It's something that's worth investing into. That's what the Torah says. Work on what's permanent. The rest will follow. Who doesn't understand that there's a natural attraction between a man and his wife? Baruch Hashem, we don't need to talk much about. We need to elaborate. Everything else will follow. But that's not the way you have to work on. You have to focus on what doesn't come easy. That's what's going to reinforce your marriage. So what is a real pleasure? I believe it is Rav Dessler that says the following, that pleasure is not always only about the sensation that one feels at the moment when which he gets from the source of pleasure. But he says it is subject to the effort one makes in order to get this pleasure. I repeat, it's not just about the sensation you get from that source of pleasure, but it is dependent on how much effort you have to produce, you have to generate in order to get that pleasure. Take an example of a child. You have two types of children, or parents rather. One that whatever they may ask the parents, they'll get. I want an electric car, I want this, I want that, no problem. Parents could afford it, right? It starts with electric scooters, right? And then one eventually becomes a car, and maybe a house later on. And some parents, there's no problem. Whatever the child asks, just leave me alone here. Here's the check, here's the credit card, unlimited, it's all yours. Other parents will say, wait a minute, you want to get a prize? Let's make a chart. Let's earn your prize. Let's make it checks, brush your teeth for a month. You get maybe a little gift in the dollar store. At least you show the child that you got to earn something. Who enjoys more his prize? Obviously, the one who worked hard, because he earned it. He toiled tirelessly to be able to make it. Chazal said it's the same thing. You want to really feel pleasure through your marriage, you got to earn it. How do you earn it? Well, Tarat HaMishpacha tells you, you got to wait. You got to wait another day, until finally the couple is back together. So it's something that you earn. You don't just get it in an unlimited fashion, in every form and shape. Unlimited about the quantity and the quality of the physical intimacy. No, you got to earn it. That is the type of pleasure that really picks you up. It's a type of pleasure that's enhanced. It's not just a mundane pleasure. And this type of pleasure, Chazal tell us, is not something that you feel kind of losing with time. Right? The excitement doesn't fade away like it would happen to somebody who eats chocolate morning, afternoon, and evening. Even if you get the most, refined chocolate. Anybody knows the brand name of chocolate they sell in Paris? Damiel. Nobody? Damiel. Damiel. It's about €2 every little chocolate, but in the box, of course, kasher. Every single one of them has a different flavor. But something, if you ever taste that chocolate, you will never ever buy chocolate in Canada, North America ever again. I guarantee you. It's proven. Badukum nuse, right? So even if you have this kind of chocolate, but your wife is kind enough to serve you 3 times a day, so after a day or two, you stop going home. You don't go home anymore, right? Because what do you mean? How much could you have? Same thing with marriage. The Torah says, no, you have to earn the pleasure. You have to wait. You have to get, it doesn't come easy. That takes care of this issue of lassitude, that we don't kind of lose the excitement towards marriage. So remember, we started off with the question, how does the observance of Taharat HaMishpacha promote harmony in one's marriage? So far, we covered different aspects. One is to learn how to discipline oneself and control his urges, his passions, which every man has naturally, to make it under control and give the wife the time to feel emotionally loved and appreciated by the husband. That's a tremendous asset that we gain by keeping Taharat HaMishpacha. Another one is to learn how to earn the right to enjoy, to have the pleasure through marriage, not to overuse it and lose its excitement for it, but rather to earn it and to enhance that kind of pleasure. Of course, to use that only as a means to elevate oneself and one's relationship, one's bond, but not as a purpose for itself. And here's one more aspect that Chazal bring out about how much enjoyment can one feel. So Chazal bring out a concept of Mayim Gduvim Yimtaku, which translates Pasuk in Mishlei, Perek Tet Yud Zayin. Pasuk says, stolen water is sweet. How does that relate to marriage? Anybody can tell me? Maybe a little bit in case I'm running out of my notes. How does it connect with marriage? Prohibited? Now, again, I'll mention some that France may not be so, there's a perfume in France called l'interdit, the prohibited. Where they got this from, I think it's from this pasuk. I'll tell you why. Because Chazal tell us to really enjoy something, you actually, if it's prohibited, if it's something that's far removed from you, somehow it feels more attractive to you. Tell a child, don't cross the street. Or don't do, specifically because you told him not to do it, he'll do it. Sometimes it's better not to say anything, just be around to make sure you can jump on him in case he does. But don't say anything. The minute you say, you have a mechanism of doing the opposite. So when you have something that's not under your access, you have no access to it, that itself can make it more attractive to you. Many times Chazal talk about this. A man may be enticed by another woman, strange woman, and it could be provocated by another woman other than his wife. And many times it's not because this woman has anything special. Many times she has actually nothing to her, but it's just the fact that she's not yours. You have no access to her, that she could very easily create a sort, I would say, kind of imagination in a man about her being somewhat special, somewhat, and that's what creates a sort of challenge, of enticement for a man. Not because she's a special, just because she's not yours, and you know that you couldn't have access to if you wanted to. So that just brings us the concept of Mayim Gduvim Imtaku. There's a Gemara actually that brings a story of a man, Gemara Nedarim, the very ending of the Gemara Masechet Nedarim, the very last few lines of the Gemara. The Gemara talks about a story of a man who left his house for quite an amount of time, and as he was heading back towards his house, what does he see? Another man running out of his own house where his wife was staying at the time, and obviously the normal, natural feeling would be
She's cheating.
maybe she's cheating on him. The story goes on, says the Gemara, that as the man was running away from the house, he saw that the husband who was heading towards the house was about to step on a snake, I believe, and he screams out to him, says, watch out, there's a snake, don't step on it, he's going to bite you. So basically, he saved the life of the husband. So the Gemara says, because of this anecdote, we have to assume that the man who is suspected of doing something with a married woman did not do anything wrong. Because if he did something wrong, would have wanted the husband to die, so he could marry this woman, right? So that's what the Gemara says. Based on this reaction of the suspected person, you could assume he didn't do anything wrong because he tried to save the life of the husband. And then Tosafot asks, what's the big deal? It makes sense. What does the Gemara even have to say that? It's obvious. If the man tried to save the husband, that means he didn't do anything wrong. What do you even have to write it in the Gemara? And Tosafot says, because we may think differently. You may think that precisely the opposite is true. That the man must have committed a sin with a woman, and for that reason alone, he would have wanted the husband to stay alive. Precisely. Why? So the next time over, when he would go back with this woman, he's going to feel the taste of the prohibited. And his enjoyment will be far greater than if he lets the husband die, and then he could marry this woman in a permissible way. So what did we learn from this? And by the way, Tosafot says that most people don't know this concept, that Mayim Gduvim Imtaku. It is a concept that is not widespread. So now we know that we have access to the Chazal, and the question is, how do you manage through your marriage if your wife is never prohibited to you, and you can't have this component to feel that special sweetness in marriage, through marriage, with your own wife, because she's never prohibited to you, while other women, stranger women, could entice you very easily just because they are not under your reach. So how do you manage? This creates an unbalance, or like a balance in marriage. And the obvious answer is nida. So what happens when the woman's nida? You get to feel the taste of the prohibited. And then when she's back after the tevilah, then everything is back to normal. You get to feel this excitement that you have been yearning for, that taste of the prohibited that you felt for 12 days or so. Now, finally, you have access to. You can enjoy it yourself. That's another aspect of nida, how that promotes more enhanced pleasure, because finally you're able to feel what it means in your own wife to be prohibited. So then when she goes to the tevilah, you can feel and enjoy that special sweetness of Mayim Gduvim. We're all familiar with the statement of Rabbi Meir Baal HaNes that says in the Gemara that the reason why the Torah gave us this special mitzvah of Taharat HaMishpacha is in order to שתהיה חביבה על בעלה כיום כניסתה לחופה, that a woman should be dear to the husband as on the wedding day. Every time a woman goes to the mikveh after the separation of Taharat of Nida, that gives the husband the feeling it's a new wedding day again. You feel again, Hatuna Chadasha, something, a type of feeling that nobody who does not keep Taharat HaMishpacha could ever have as a feeling. I would like to say even on his wedding days. On his wedding day, because nowadays, unfortunately, people consume their marriage in the secular world before the wedding day. Right? So they never have a wedding day. They don't keep Taharat HaMishpacha, and on the wedding day is not the first, relations together. So Am Yisrael Kedoshim, we have this opportunity every single month to feel again like Chatan v'Kala. So at first sight, Nida would look like it's here to reject intimacy, to kind of choke a husband and wife, tell them, okay, you keep away for half the time. Don't even get close to each other physically. But in fact, that's what we explained. It's just the contrary is actually what's true, that Taharat HaMishpacha is here to maintain the freshness of the relationship between husband and wife. Okay, so let's move on a little bit into a few halachot about this very important mitzvah, especially areas where it could be leading to misconception. Number one, the halachot of nida, the laws of nida which apply to a Jewish woman, apply to a married woman as much as they apply to a single woman. Let it be clear that the laws of nida don't begin after the chuppah v'kiddushin. They apply equally to any woman as soon as she gets to become nida, which is usually around her age of when she turns 12. She gets to her normal natural cycle. She's nida, and it doesn't matter if she's married or not, right? But people who feel no before they get married, there's no nida. It's totally false. We know that this is not true at all. And that affects also the laws of yichud. Yichud, when a man is secluded with a woman in an enclosed area. So the Chazal tell us that with a woman who is nida, those laws apply on a Torah level, not rabbinical level, but on Torah level, biblical level, which means it's asur min Torah to have yichud with any girl these days, single girls, because we know that nowadays single girls do not attend the mikveh, and for good reason. We don't let them go to a mikveh. So this means that yichud with a single woman is asur min Torah based on the fact that nida applies as soon as a woman is up to it, a girl is up to that age that she's expected to have had her period, she's nida, regardless of the fact that she's married or not single. Another very important area that we need to explain, for women who do teshuvah, there's ba'alat teshuvah. Imagine a woman did teshuvah after her state of menopause. That means that from the time she did teshuvah, she never ever had any reason to become nida again. But if she never went through the whole process of purification, she's going to be nida for the rest of her life. To a woman like that, all you have to tell her is to put aside $18. It's a one-time deal. You go to the mikveh one time after the whole process of purification, and you're good to go for the rest of your life if you don't change your state. But if a woman doesn't realize that, she may think, look, I became teshuvah after I had no longer my period, so I'm good to go, I'm kosher. In fact, she's totally 100% nida for the rest of her life, unless she would go through the whole process, even though she's not seeing blood or any other period for months or even years. I'll read to you what the Rambam says, that once a woman became a nida, she remains nida, afilu avru aleha kama yamin v'shanim, even if she went through days and years, but she's missing on the tahalich at-tahara. She did not go through the whole process of purification. She will remain till the end of her days nida. So it's a very important thing. Some people may have a mother who may have done teshuvah later, or an aunt, or somebody who's again older. It's good for to be able to bring it up to them, because she may be, not aware that she's like going against the laws of nida out of lack of knowledge. This is a basic knowledge in halachot of nida that one has to know. Then we obviously know that when a woman becomes a nida, she has to go through a process of purification, which has to it 4 components. Can someone remind me a little bit about the different stages? Different steps to take to be able to recover from the state of nida. There's 4 of them. If you're missing any of the 4, it's as if you didn't do anything. All right. So the first one is hefsek tara, the interruption of purification, which is the first examination a woman makes to determine that she's no longer, the blood is not coming out of her anymore. that is a must. Without hefsek tahara, you cannot start the count of the 7 clean days. Right? Even if in your mind you are counting the 7 clean days, halacha does not recognize that as part of the Shiva Nikim. So hefsek tahara is a must, is mandatory, and without which you cannot even start the 7 clean days. Second step would be to count the 7 clean days.
7 days.
7 days. 7 days. I was like, 7 days. Shiva Nikim. Like we know for the pasuk, v'safer ala shivat yamin ve'achar tithar. She shall count to herself 7 days, and only then use a tevilah mikveh to purify herself. The third step after doing hefsek tahara, the first verification, going through the 7 days following that. The next step would be preparing to the tevilah, the preparation, achana la tevilah, which is a whole set of different things that women have to do to make sure. What's the purpose of preparing for the tevilah? To make sure that there'll be no chatzitza, no body to interfere between the person's body and the water. As we know that the person has to be fully immersed under the water, and so much so that even if a tip of her hair sticks out of the water, the mikveh is invalid. It's not 99% valid, it's 0% valid. Right? Teeth, how you have a tooth coming out of the mikveh, how do you do that? Oh, if you have stitches, if you have chatzitza in the teeth, to make sure that there's no like bandages or fillings, temporary fillings, flossing. Right? But when you do flossing, you have to be careful. No, otherwise you don't have a wife after that. You have a kadisha. No, they don't have to open the mouth, but nevertheless, the halacha is that they should be allowed. There should be no chatzitza inside. Ra'ui lebila. Gemara says it has to be ra'ui, even though the water doesn't physically enter the mouth, but it has to be able to. Okay, and the final step of the 4-step process is tevilah itself. The tevilah has to be, of course, in the mikveh tahara, as we all know. And if any of those things is missing, then the tahara is not happening. The woman remains the same level of nida as if she didn't do anything. Now,
isn't the hachana done in the mikveh with the mikveh lady?
It's optional. You could do it in the mikveh if you have a room for it, or you could do it at home. What's very important for those women that do choose to do the preparation at home, the husband has to be present, especially if there are kids around, to allow the wife to be very relaxed. Because the whole preparation, it creates a lot of stress to a woman normally. And if a woman goes inside the mikveh while she's stressed out, for example, she bites on her lips a little bit too tight, the whole mikveh is invalid. Or if she closes her eyelids tight, also it's invalid. So it's very important to create an environment where the woman feels relaxed, and husband, like we mentioned before, has to know those halachot. He has to involve himself to be able to provide the environment that's conducive for his wife to feel relaxed and able to fulfill the halacha properly. So a very important thing about bedikot. Bedikot means internal examination that a woman has to conduct in order to establish that she is actually clean, right? A bedika is an internal examination. Usually they use a cloth. They're supposed to use a bedika, a cloth to check themselves, that they wrap around their index finger, and they have to insert it inside the vaginal canal to make sure that it is clean without any residue of blood. That's the purpose of tevilah. So they would insert it inside, as we're going to explain soon how to do it, and making sure that when they pull out the cloth, to check the cloth to make sure there's nothing on it. If there's any questionable color on it, regardless of the size of it, it must be brought to a posek, to a rav, to determine whether or not it's kosher. Okay. Now, the poskim says there's 2 main requirements about the way to do the bedikat, to conduct the examination. One is how deep he has to go inside. And the second one is what we're going to explain. So first of all, how deep does the cloth have to reach when a woman does an internal examination? So the Chachamim say that it has to be deep enough, as deep as she could reach, without scratching her cervix or irritating her cervix. So she has to make sure that she goes in deep enough. If it's not deep enough, Chachamim call this a kinuach, not a bedika, and it's worth how much? 0. That means the mikveh is invalid. the bracha the women will make inside the mikveh is invalid, and every time she goes with her husband, it's like a regular nida. So why am I bringing this up? Because there are some halachot which are okay, so important. For example, how many times should a woman dip inside the mikveh? Most people do 3 times, but this is like make a radin once is enough. You want to do 3, as they say by our brothers, the Iraqis, gesundheit, right? It's fine. 1, 2, 3 is fine. Spanish. Some people do more than 3. They do 7 or whatever numbers they have. It's almost like folklore, right? But it's fine. If you do it, do it. But that's not me'akev. The mikveh is good with once, as long as you do it properly. There's a whole bunch of requirements how women should basically go inside inside the mikveh, what position she should have to make sure she allows the water to reach out every part of her body. So this is very mandatory. This is not but once is good enough if she does it properly. When to say the bracha on the mikveh, before or after, this is a big subject of discussion, of controversy between the Sephardim, the Moroccans, and the Maran. If you ask that Maran, you should say the bracha before the mikveh. If you ask the Moroccans, obviously they will tell you to do it after, like the Ashkenazim, but that's not so important. Either way, what's important is to do it what the mother used to do. Follow the minhagim of the mother. That's the most important. Whether you did it the right way or you reverse the order of the bracha and the mikveh, it has absolutely no relevance to the state of the woman. Actually, even if a woman went inside the mikveh without saying any bracha, what's the halacha? She's 100% tehorah to the husband. And even if she wants to go back and say the bracha, she shouldn't do the bracha anymore. Right? She's yotzeh the tefillah already. So that is a very important halacha, but it's not what we call me'akev. It doesn't hold back the whole status of the woman. Whereas if a woman does a b'dikot, a little bit like rushed, because she didn't have time, or maybe she's lacking patience for it, then the b'dikah doesn't count. It's as if she didn't do a b'dikah. Remember we said if a woman is missing the first b'dikah of hefsek tahara, she can't go into the 7 clean days. So the b'dikah has to be done, as we said, as deeply as possible without irritating yourself. And there's a second important requirement, which is to make sure to cover any folds and crevices that the vaginal walls of the vaginal canal may have. Apparently, Chazal tells us they may have some folds. It's not a smooth muscle. There's a little bit like folds and crevices. So in case she feels any of those, she has to go in and out. So she has to go actually a 360-degree rotation movement to cover every part of the, right? Obviously, they should do that in a rotation, right, movement. And again, this is not a chumrah, this is meikar adin. So this is very important to know that those things are me'akev. Now, if you count how many bdikot altogether between the hefsek tahara and the 7 clean days, how many is that? So hefsek is 1. Every day of the 7 clean days, you should make 2. So as far as I remember from learning in school, 1 plus 14 is 15. There's actually 1 more, the moch dachuk. So maybe 16. Okay, fine. So those are mandatory. It's not like you could. It's not optional. It's mandatory. Nevertheless, if a woman missed on some of the bdikot, could she go to the mikveh still? Yes, as long as she did 3. There's 3 most important ones. Hefsek tahara, the first one, and the b'dikah on day 1 of the 7 days, and b'dikah on the day 7. I repeat, hefsek tahara, the first day of the 7 and the last of 7, 1 on each. These are not just mandatory. These are like if you didn't have it, you can't go. She can't go to the mikveh. Yes.
When after the 5 days, she does a b'dikah.
Oh, 5 days. Very good. 5 days.
Oh, 7 days.
5 days? No, you said good. 5 days. On day 5. So let's explain. Hefsek tahara. When does hefsek tahara take place? Usually after either 4 or 5 days from the beginning of the period, or when she became a nida. Okay. So let's give an example. If a woman became a nida on a Sunday afternoon, as long as this took place before sunset, because for the laws of nida we always go by sunset and sunrise, not dawn and nightfall, like for most other halachot. For nida, we go by sunrise and sunset. So we count 5 days, including the day that she started becoming a nida, and the day when the hefsek tahara, the very first examination takes place. So if she started on Sunday, before sunset, let's say at 3 p.m., she became a nida. So that counts even if it's an hour before sunset, it's already day 1, it's already counted. Monday is day 2, Tuesday 3, Wednesday 4, Thursday 5. That means that on Thursday, if her body allows her to feel clean and to conduct a bedika properly, she could have her bedika of hefsek tahara on Thursday before sunset.
But why are you calling it hefsek midah?
Hefsek tahara, because that's the hefsek that allows you to go into the tahara process.
Is that tchilat tahara?
No, because the hefsek tahara only counts if it comes out clean, totally clean. So it is hefsek tahara, right? Right. And now, if Thursday was actually the day that she was able to do a proper bedika of hefsek tahara, she could start counting the 7 days as of Thursday night, Friday, day 1, and then Shabbat, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday.
She checks every second day.
So exactly a week later, from the day she did hefsek tahara, she could go to the mikveh, except that the hefsek tahara was on that day. In my example, was on Thursday, but it was before sunset, and the mikveh would be the following Thursday after nightfall. If everything went clean,
And in between,
she had to do b'dikot in between. To the very least, on the day of hefsek tahara, and on day 1 and day 7. That's the least that she has to have in order to go to the mikveh. Right. Meikar adin, she should do every day, twice a day. Now you have sometimes a situation where a woman feels like it's very difficult to make every single b'dika. For example, a woman after birth, delivery, or a young kala could be very, very sore and sensitive inside the area. So she may get a heter from a rab to cut down on the number of b'dikot, that even lechatchila she should be allowed to conduct less than the 15 required b'dikot. Instead, she could do less. Okay? So that's also a very important halakha that one needs to know. Now, the day of the hefsek tahara never counts as day 1 of the 7 days. Very important to know that. Right? The poskim bring down, there's a lot of people that used to make that mistake. The day when the very first bedika takes place, what we call hefsek tahara, the first examination, that day is not counted as day 1 of the 7 days, even though it comes out clean. This is just the start point to be able to count the next day as day 1 of the 7 clean days. So in our example, Thursday was the day when she had the hefsek tahara. The following week, the next day, Friday morning, will be day 1 of the 7 days. Will end the following Thursday. If you count 7 days from Thursday night, Friday will end Thursday afternoon. Now, what happens if a woman feels like, I tried to do hefsek tahara, but guess what? It didn't come out clean. So if it's not so, if it's a questionable color, you should ask her up. But if not, then she's obviously has to wait till she's actually able to have a clean bedika of hefsek tahara. Okay, I think we're going to end here. So I would like to thank everybody for being here tonight. Yes. Shovavim. Shovavim is a time when you reinforce. Shovavim is a time when we reinforce ourselves to Kedusha. It's a special time, opportune time for bringing Kedusha into the home. It brings a lot of Kedusha to the home. This is a time to Ta'anit also. If you make Ta'anit, it's okay, but you have to attend the shiur. If not, Ta'anit without the shiur, it's not worth it. Better come to the shiur and leave the Ta'anit for some other time. Because nowadays we're very weak. We're very weak. There's a connection, of course. The people who do Ta'anit also. I think here we have Ta'anit.
We want to thank again Rabbi Pinto for a very enlightening shiur. Just for those that came a bit late, let's encourage our better halves, the ladies, for the next couple of weeks. Most roads only back next week, and Rabbi Pinto will be here in 2 weeks for the ladies. Similar shiurim, but directed differently with some different halachot which pertain to them. Wishing everybody a wonderful week ahead. All the best.
Thank you.